What's up, everybody? Thralls Mellow here once again. I'm Necrotic Nick.
I'm Jammin John.
And we have an album review for you, and one that has been on our list for a while because, well, we went over the last one, and I was kind of curious what they do with the next one. That's kind of basically it there. So we're going to go over the latest offering from Vomit Forth, Terrified of God. This comes out on the 11th of October on Century Media Records. This band formed in 2018 in Connecticut. This is their second full-length overall. I got into this band with their Northeastern Deprivation EP. Just nasty, vicious, kind of a hybrid between death metal and hardcore. We actually went over their last one, Seething Malevolence, and we were a little bit let down by that one, to be honest. It just kind of didn't match up to at least what they were doing on their EPs, but we've seen this band live before, and they absolutely crush.
And that's kind of how I got into them. I didn't get into them necessarily with an album so much as I did that we saw them live with somebody. I don't remember who, but we saw them live, and I thought they were pretty badass, and I bought the shirt, and that's where I'm at with Vomit Forth. And we went over the last album, and me basing what I liked about this band, seeing them live, I didn't necessarily get on the last album, but it's okay, because here we are again, and I wanted to give them another shot, and that's where we are.
And baseline, I think this album is a lot better than Seething Malevolence. Not only in terms of like dynamics, intensity, brutality, all the things that you kind of look for in like just bludgeoning heavy death metal, and I guess to some extent like some brutal hardcore in there too, but production-wise.
Yes.
Now, weirdly enough, the production that I didn't like actually came from Arthur Risk, who I believe at least mastered the last album, and overall it just felt flat, muddy, very indistinct, and it really just didn't help like the songs, which the songs kind of felt a little bit safe, or at least safe in comparison to this album. This production was actually handled by Randy LaBeouf. I think that's how you say his last name.
LaBeouf.
Hopefully it's not LaBeouf, because Boof means something entirely different. But he has worked with bands like The Acacia Strain, Jesus Peace, and Thy Art Is Murder, and this album right away just sounds better. Like, it's more crisp. The guitars have a much crunchier, more just kind of brutal sound. Pretty much just everything about it just sounds better than the last one.
Big chunky guitars. That was something huge that was missing in the last recording, at least. The guitars sounded so muffled and flat and just kind of just... But here, they sound a lot chunkier, a lot crunchier. They're definitely more present. Big poppy drums. The drums I thought were a little bit loud, but it's not really a big deal. Just plain and simple, this sounds good, and that's a good thing.
Yeah. And, I mean, like, across the board in terms of this album, it is a little bit different than the last one. Actually, I would say it kind of goes back to Northeastern Deprivation in a sense, because, I don't know, like, I feel like I hear a lot more of the hardcore influences come out. But when it comes down to the death metal influences, it's faster, it's meaner, it's more unhinged. And, that's definitely due to the music on here, because the transitions are absolutely nuts. The songs, for the most part, are short, violent as hell, and kind of cathartic in a way. And a big part of that cathartic feeling is Kane. Kane's vocals on here are absolutely savage, and he really shows off a much broader wheelhouse in terms of vocal deliveries than he did on the last album and the Northeastern Deprivation EP. I think my version of that actually has the other EP, which I don't remember its name, but it was a compilation. Either way, he is doing all sorts of just crazy growls, screams. There's like distorted groans and such. Occasionally, maybe like a bit of a spoken word. That could be some of the samples on here, which are fucked up. Blood-Soaked Death Dream, the little excerpt at the end of that, will probably stick with me for a while, because it's about a woman that said she was locked in a coffin with the body of her friend, and she never felt more close to her. And like, wow, that's something.
You need to talk to somebody. Take some years. Get your life together. Call me back.
I don't know if it's an actual news excerpt or like a, like witness testimony or something, but it is unsettling. But that is kind of par for the course with a lot of the samples on here. They create this very anxious, dark, just very sinister atmosphere. And I mean, with the title of this album, I feel like a lot of it is also centered on religion too. I mean, there's definitely like church bells, and the opening track, Victim Impact Statement, actually has excerpts from a sermon, I think. It's very distorted and very creepy sounding, but I'm not a fan of going in church anyway, because I think it's creepy to begin with. But that atmosphere coupled with the music feels like this is like, catharsis for like, I don't know, like Catholic Church-induced trauma of some kind, because it definitely has like kind of the Catholic feel to it, like the darker, spookier side of Catholicism, which, I mean, honestly, it kind of makes up a good chunk of it.
I only ever went to Catholic church to eat the bread and drink the wine. That was really about it.
And that started my journey into alcoholism. But that's a different story.
And some songs that really utilized the atmosphere fairly well. Songs like Poison Child, Fear of Retaliation, and the last track, Salt, which I think is probably one of the bigger atmospheric songs overall. That song just had a lot more room to breathe and sounded very sinister.
It's also one of the more melodic tracks on here. Like, and don't get that confused that this is like a pretty melodic song. It isn't.
Not.
It's brutal as hell, but there are some like good melodic hooks in there, and the atmosphere complements the melody. A lot of the atmosphere on here is generally like waves of noise and static, and then like samples underneath or like a spoken word. It's to enhance the overall creepy vibe of this and kind of play off the outright brutality of this. But on Salt, it kind of backs the melodic riff, or more melodic riff on here. And it kind of generates like a really cool hook on it. Fear of Retaliation, though, I think really stood out to me because like that song just kicks in the door with like suffocation style riffs. Like it's blasty. It's like full extension blast too, like the very Mike Smith blast. Heavy tremolos, chugs all over, big switches to groove. And then it kind of drops out for a bit and this swell of atmosphere comes in and it kind of transitions into just another savage breakdown. And oh my god, this album is packed with savage breakdowns.
Blood-Soaked Death Dream, Negative Penance. Negative Penance actually has 3 breakdowns that I counted. Non-Responsive and Fear of Retaliation. Like, those songs in particular have a cut and dry breakdown placed into them. Because for the most part, most of these riffs are fairly short-lived. But those songs had longer breakdowns.
And the breakdowns frequently do like the halftime thing. Like you start in one like mid-tempo groove. It's generally heavily syncopated. And then they kind of do like a really good like slow down to it. And you get that halftime breakdown, which generally means the venue is going to get destroyed. But I was actually surprised at like the riff variety on here. Like the last one kind of just stuck to like the chugs. Like you got a couple of tremolos in there. Like some of them were kind of harmonized. But a lot of it felt very straightforward. Here, the riff work is like a little bit more on the technical side, honestly. Like you get like some nasty techie bits on Sacred Apple, Poison Child too. Like the riff work is just decidedly more intricate and aggressive. And then the frequent shifts from like flat out like brutal death metal, sometimes almost kind of like tech death, to flat out like hardcore breakdowns. There's a ton of hardcore on this album. Rotting Wool in particular, I would say, is more hardcore than it is death metal. Like it definitely has like more death metal vocals because Kane's got like a nasty voice. But the groove overall, the riffs themselves scream more like metallic hardcore, like a more brutal version of like Hatebreed or Earth Crisis. It's not loaded with like death metal brutality, but a lot of these songs, it's a big kind of give and take between those two styles and like the most punishing versions they could possibly play of either style. When I saw that the producer had worked with Jesus Piece, a lot of that really made sense to me. You can definitely hear their style of hardcore in here, which I mean, I still think has like a hint of death metal to it, but it's more brutal, it's more shifty, it's more kind of spazzy overall. Like some of the songwriting on here, granted it's kind of a different style than the band I'm about to compare it to, is kind of comparable in terms of like how they do their like quick jarring transitions. Botch, like some of this stuff reminds me a lot of Botch if they were like a decidedly more death metal centric band.
This album is jam-packed full of constant transitions. Like it skips around quite a bit. For me, that makes it both a positive and a negative. It's scatterbrained, and I like how unhinged it is because it just makes it sound more crazy. But at the same time, it never really latches onto a groove too long. And this record is packed full of grooves. There are awesome riffs in here. They're just not held on too long enough.
And I mean, with the transitions happening as frequently as they are, I mean, it does kind of like throw you off because, you know, like me naturally, like I hear a groove, I want to settle into it for a couple of measures. But in terms of what they do in the transitions to like the next part, one of the cool things I think that really helps cement those transitions are Kane's vocals, because he frequently shifts his delivery a lot. Like you can go from like a more hardcore bellow to death metal growls to like deep brutal death gurgles to high screams. So those transitions are kind of interesting because it feels like they are following like a vocal rant And it kind of makes this sound even more like angsty and explosive and like more unhinged. Like if you walked up behind any of these songs and pat them on the shoulder like, hey, you okay? You were going to be greeted with a brick to the face. But I will say that a lot of the songs are too short. In fact, this album is only 27 minutes long. The first 2 tracks, Victim Impact Statement and Sacred Apple, are under 2 minutes long, and a good chunk of these are under 2 minutes long. So not only are the transitions quick and you only get to hear like that killer riff you really, really liked for maybe a second before they transition, they don't really like use the time to kind of like revisit them. Or, you know, take those awesome parts and maybe like extend them a measure.
And that really got to me on songs like Fixation on the Narrative. I actually really like all the riffs in that song, and there's a bunch of cool like gross tremolos, and everything that they transition to hits really hard. But the song is so short that none of that has any time to breathe, and I really like that song. But it just ends, and you're like, oh, come on. Because even the breakdown build-up in there was super sick, and I was like, man, here we go. And then it ends, and I'm like, dude, come on. I felt that way about a lot of these songs. Jam-packed full of awesome riffs and awesome grooves, but everything you love is gone before you realize it.
Yeah, Fixation on the Narrative, like that one introduced like one of the cleaner vocal takes. Yep. It kind of has this like sludge metal breakdown. Kind of remind me like Kingdom of Sorrow a little bit. But it's very short-lived, and you know, just as I was like kind of really getting into this almost more melodic spot, it kind of shifts. And that's kind of the same with the breakdowns too. Like, you know, the breakdown grooves will hit like, yeah, we're gonna hang out here for, oh no, we already got the slowdown. Yep. Like the breakdowns hang around long enough for you to like pick up the chair that you want to throw, but by the time you want to throw it, they've already changed the tempo and it just wouldn't feel right. I know, I get it. I also don't like the fact that the title track is just like kind of a segue track. It's, you know, church bells and creepy whispers. Like, it's unsettling as hell. And it does fit with all the samples and themes on here. But it's just that. And it doesn't really transition into Fear of Retaliation very well. In fact, Fear of Retaliation just kind of, like, kicks down the door and, like, punches you in the face. Whereas the other one, you know, it's just, like, kind of a build-up there. Now, with this complaint about the short songs, the main reason I'm complaining is because I like them. Yeah. Like, I would love to hear some of these parts really kind of, like, drawn out a little bit. Like, you know, like, just, like, a couple of measures. Because, man, when those grooves hit, they hit hard. When those breakdowns hit, they hit possibly even harder. Mm-hmm. There is a lot of stuff going on here that I really like. I just wish it would hang out for a little bit longer. And I like the direction they're going in with this one, too, mm-hmm. because it sounds way more visceral, way more angry, way more focused than the last one. Even though it's kind of haphazard in terms of like all the transitions and everything, it still feels cohesive, and it is just an overall nasty listen. So overall, I'm going to give this 3.5 stars. I dig this. The elements that I think could be better, it's mostly just kind of extending out like all the stuff they're doing, because again, it happens so quickly. By the time you find something you really like, it's already transitioning out of that moment, and you're like, man, I already miss you, killer riff.
You're right.
The vocals on here, I think, are awesome. Like, Kane did an amazing job in here, and from what I picked up on the lyrical themes, yeah, no, this is a dark, twisted listen. The atmospheric elements that are peppered in here, I think, really add a lot to this listen. Like, it's not just like dry, blunt force trauma, just beat you over the head with a 2x4 death metal. It actually has like a darker, more twisted character to it. And I think that gives it like a little bit more depth. If you're a big fan of, I mean, Acacia Strain, kinda, Jesus Piece, definitely. And I don't know, like kind of like technical brutal death metal and like metallic hardcore. So I mean, I could throw in like Mole in there too. Yeah. 200 Stab Wounds, Sanguisugabog, stuff like that. Just check this album out. It's nasty.
I completely agree. It's also 3.5 stars for me. That rhymes. Poet and don't know it. I like everything that's happening in this record. It just happens so quickly that I can't grasp a hold of it. But this is jam-packed full of awesome riffs, awesome grooves, a wild vocal performance. Really, I dig the improvement in the production, hands down. I'm glad to hear everything and have it not be so flat and just kind of there, because I know this band is really talented and really good at what they do. It's got a bunch of groove in it, although done in little pockets. It's off to the races, man. They don't waste any time, with the exception of that little interlude that they have. It's straight to the throat. all the time. Like, there's not a minute that they really relent on choking the living shit out of you in this album.
Oh,
so,
dude, they put a knee to the throat, man.
Yep. I would recommend staying clear of the pit if you see this live, or get in it. I don't know, it could be fun. Because with the grooves not hanging around a whole long time, you might get punched, but by the time they wind up their throw that punch, it changes and then they can't punch you anymore. So it could just be a bunch of people going,
I was going to punch you to the rhythm of the breakdown, but, they changed it. I'll get you next time.
Yep. I like where this is going. I like what it's becoming. And I will agree, too, that this is a lot darker than you would think it is. It's not just a collection of brutal slams and whatnot. Like, it's pretty actually disturbing, and I like that, too. Overall, if you're a fan of bands like Dying Fetus, Suffocation, 200 Stab Wounds, definitely Jesus Piece. When you brought up the producer and said he worked on Jesus Piece, it made sense, because that's all over this record. Yeah, bunch of metallic hardcore and a bunch of brutal death metal. If you like that stuff, you're probably going to dig this. I'd recommend checking it out.
So, if you enjoyed this review, give it a thumbs up. And if you're new to the channel, subscribe, because we do stuff like this all the time. We also now have memberships. If you'd like to support us directly, there is a button down below that says join. As far as perks so far, we are just offering a members-only chat, which we will do possibly sometime next month. This month is just insanely busy with releases, so I don't know if we'll have time to do much streaming, but we will be doing those probably at least once a month for you guys. Again, it's only 99 cents. I am eventually going to put some more emojis in there other than the booger troll, but the booger troll's stupid.
That's classic, you guys.
It's classic us dumb. And that's why it's our token emoji. Either way, this does kind of help us afford StreamYard, because StreamYard, I believe, is raising their prices here soon. And this just helps support the channel. We would appreciate it if you consider it. If not, that's totally cool too. But either way, just check it out.
And last but not least, again, tons of stuff going on at Thralls of Metal. Album reviews up the wazoo, because October, man, the end of the year is always backloaded with records, and that's a lot to take on, especially when the first 10 months of the year were jam-packed full of albums. Anyway, album reviews, discography rankings, multiple discussion forums, states of metal, is it not metal, Nick's never-ending collection updates, What's John Jamming will be returning, tons of stuff going on. In the end, we do this all for you guys. We genuinely appreciate everybody who has become a part of Thralls of Metal, our family, our friends, everyone that's subscribed, everybody that talks to us. This is a really cool thing that we do, but we appreciate you, and we like to show our thanks.
Yeah, you guys absolutely roll. Tons more content coming your way. So one more big thank you because of all your awesomenesses, and we will catch you later.